How much does a quality of earnings report cost? Hi, my name is Mushfiq Sarkar. I am the founder of webacquisition.com. We are a due diligence M&A firm that helps buyers acquire online businesses and physical businesses. One of our service offerings is quality of earnings, and this is a question we get a lot. How much does it cost? Quick answer before I get into the details. The range varies from 6,500 on the low end up to 15,000 plus on the high end, depending on complexity, depending on type of report, depending on the type of business, and we'll get into the details. Why is a QE important? So just to really explain this, which is really important to justify the cost, the goal of a QE analysis is to verify the finances such that the business valuation makes sense. So what does that mean? As a buyer, you went under LOI under a specific valuation with a seller claimed, broker claimed seller discretionary earnings. And that dictated the valuation that you went under LOI. Our job as your buy side analysts and your buy side M&A advisors is to go into the details of the finances, that's bank statements, accounting records, tax statements, to work backwards and figure out, is the claimed seller discretionary earnings actually true? Because remember, sellers are giving you a P&L, CIM documents that just state a number. How can you trust that number? That's why we are here. We run the financial analysis, QE analysis, to figure out if that is actually true. So our job is to uncover any financial red flags. Now, that might not be deliberate by the seller. It could be just mistakes in how they categorize revenue. So, for example, very often we see recurring revenue and then all of a sudden spikes in revenue. Now, those spikes in revenues are one time, very, very random, and those should not always be factored in unless there's a reason for that, right? But at least as a buyer, you should know what is that stable revenue versus that random revenue that comes in. Second, our job is to verify the claimed earnings. I kind of touched on this. Sellers claiming there is specific earnings that they see on a monthly, annual basis. Our job is to go back through all the records, the bank statements, actual money flowing into the bank to figure out if that is the case. Securing financing, a lot of your lenders, your SBA lenders, your private lenders will require a QAE analysis because they don't want to back a deal where you're overpaying for it because obviously they're owed money for the interest rate and for the essentially for giving you the loan. Four is to validate the business valuation. Now this is really important. Again, I alluded to this. You are going under LOI at a certain valuation. Is that justified based on the actual earnings? So these four things are what a QAE analysis is for. Now, what drives the pricing? I alluded that the pricing is between 6,500 to 15,000 for a 50, and it can go higher. But that is a typical pricing for what we call boutique mergers and acquisition firms like us. Now, business size is very important. The larger the business in terms of revenue, the more transactions there are, the more work that's involved from an M&A firm. Financial complexity, a lot of small businesses do not have proper accounting. They make mistakes, so we have to go in there and actually do a cleanup process before we can even start the QE analysis. Years analyzed, so usually QE is analyzed over 2 to 3 years of the business's history. If you need more than that as a buyer, then that's going to cost more. Scope of the report, so a light scope QE analysis is essentially an Excel workbook, very detailed Excel workbook with all the financial analysis given to you with commentary. That's the pricing on the lower end, so 6,500 to 10,000. And then the higher end is the workbook plus a full presentation PDF analysis and report that you can give to your investors, and it gives you more of a narrative. So that's on the higher end. Now, who are you working with as a provider? So boutique mergers and acquisition firms like us, we have industry expertise. We've been doing this for a long time, but our pricing is much cheaper than if you work with one of the big four accounting firms or very well-known brands in the industry. So it depends who you work with. That doesn't mean we're less experienced. It just means we don't have a lot of overhead. Turnaround time is very important. Usually the turnaround time is about 3 weeks plus for a QE analysis, but if you need it quicker, there are expedited fees that one would pay. So how do you choose the right provider? So this is probably really important, more important than it's very important to pick the right QE provider who has experience in that specific industry. So most of the times QE providers are CPAs. Usually that's a CPA's job to do that, but they have never bought a business themselves. So this is how we as web acquisition is very different. Every single person on our team has acquired multiple businesses, and many have keep acquiring businesses on a yearly basis. So we bring that expertise to your analysis. So what we do is we partner a CPA with an M&A advisor like myself who has industry expertise, and work together to do your analysis so we can bring insights from the industry into the actual financial analysis. So here are some 6 things you should look out for. Do they have experience with small business acquisitions, right? So look at their track record. Have they done these kind of analysis before? Do they have industry knowledge? If they only work with brick and mortar business, but you're wanting to buy a software business, that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Technically, a lot of QE providers will say it's just numbers, which it is. It is just a financial analysis. However, there's a meaning to the numbers behind, because we're pulling out revenues, we're going into costs and figuring out if these are accurate or not. So there has to be a sense of what is accuracy, what does that number mean. Your provider should have a clear pricing structure. The industry is on a fixed fee structure, regardless of how much time it takes us to do the work. So just be aware that the pricing and your quote is upfront and it's transparent. Number 4, do you have direct access to the analyst, right? Sometimes you have salespeople in between, but really you want to be speaking to the actual person doing the work or the advisor who's going to be doing it. Turnaround time is really important as well. These reports are not quick to do, right? These can take multiple weeks to actually do the analysis, collect the data. Sometimes the sellers don't have the data readily available, so that takes time as well. But just be aware that pick the provider that can give you the turnaround time that you need to close your deal. Do they have sample reports and references? This is really important. Each QE provider should have redacted sample reports they can send you. They should have a list of references that you can speak to as well. It's a big investment as a buyer, spending $6,500 to $15,000 plus for a report. So make sure you do your due diligence on the QE pro. Now, why do we stand out? So just really quickly, we've been buying businesses since 2008. We bring that expertise into all of our analysis. So all of our M&A advisors, myself included, we get involved in the QE analysis. So we have CPAs and financial analysts that run the analysis, and we cross-correlate our knowledge into those reports. So you're getting best of both worlds, whereas majority of QE firms do not have that experience of actually acquiring businesses. They are just financial analysts. So you're getting best of both worlds with web acquisition versus just somebody who is a financial analyst or a CPA. So we focus on businesses up to $10 million in the physical space. So think about your HVAC, law firm, dental offices, plumbing companies, etc., versus also online businesses, software companies, e-commerce, media businesses, etc. Our pricing is competitive. We range from $6,500 up to $10,000. We have fast turnaround times because we have a very flexible team that can work on multiple reports. So usually we can do things in 2 to 3 weeks. We have an experienced team that, as I said, M&As and CPAs work together, and you have direct access to your M&A advisors. Most of the time, that's me. So what's included in our reports, right? So we go very deep. We try to get as much data as possible. So that includes all bank statements, all of the financial records, getting access, actually direct guest access to QuickBooks and Xero or whatever accounting software they're using. We get tax statements. We have a questionnaire that the seller fills out as well. And we do multiple iterations of questions until we are ready to actually do the report. So there's a lot of question and answer and a lot of data that we collect. And then we develop a very detailed workbook in Excel that has the full analysis. And then we also do a summary to give you the insights that you need. Now, what we look at company and financial background. We look at the earnings quality and performance, which is analyzing the revenue, the expenses, the trends, the add backs. So a lot of times sellers add back a lot of expenses, and are those justified? We look at the cash and banking analysis. So we're going into the bank statements to see if the proof of cash, is the cash actually hitting the bank and how much. We look at cost structures, like employee cost structures or cost of goods. We look at gross profit margins, net margins, all the margin analysis. We actually get customer level data and vendor level data to understand if there's any over concentration. So if one customer is bringing in significant revenue, we can catch that and give you that insight. We also do balance sheet and working capital analysis. to understand if you're going to acquire a business, how much working capital should you have, and if you're working with an SBA lender, how much working capital should you request at close. So some questions, right? Frequently asked questions that we get. Should it be an hourly or project based? I alluded to this. It should be project based from you as a buyer's perspective, your perspective. You don't want to have it on an hourly basis because you don't know how dirty or how messy the books are for the seller's business, right? So just make sure to get a fixed price from your QE provider. It relieves all the stress from here, and just if the project takes longer, then the QE provider will still do the work. Now, what size of business benefits from a QE? This is a very important question, right? QE analysis is actually, in short, just figuring out if the seller's claims are accurate. Now, the cost of the QE analysis does not always scale with the revenue of the business. For example, there is a base cost of a QE analysis. If somebody wants a QE analysis for $100,000 business, it's still going to be that $6,500 to $15,000 range. It doesn't get cheaper because there's a number of hours our firm has to put into the project. So it really makes sense. Much economically makes sense if you're going like buying a $3 million business and spending $10K on a QE analysis. However, that doesn't mean that a $500,000 business, $100,000 business doesn't have the same risks as a $5 million business, and therefore you don't need a QE analysis. It's just a report that gives you the clarity you need to go and acquire that business. So it's up to you the value you put on that analysis. What's the typical turnaround time? Usually the market is 2 to 4 weeks. Now, what if we do the QE analysis for you as a buyer and we bring back the report and there are red flags? What do you do? So this gives you, the buyer, the opportunity to renegotiate the deal, or in the worst case, back out of the deal because of all the red flags that we found. And sometimes there are no red flags, right? That's what you're paying for. You're paying for that clarity. So a QE analysis is actually a very smart investment. It gives you that peace of mind. It gives you the data you need to know that this business actually earns money. So at Web Acquisition, we partner with buyers like you to do these analysis. We in-house have CPAs and M&A advisors, and our costs are essentially broken down into twofold. One is a QE Lite report, which is an Excel workbook, gives you everything you need, and its pricing starts at $6,500 plus. But if you need a full QAE report, which is a workbook plus a full PDF analysis, which some lenders require, then that ranges in the $9,000 plus. So I hope I answered your question in this video. How much does a QAE report typically cost? Again, it's a very worthwhile investment. And if you have any questions, please reach out at webacquisition.com and I will answer all your questions. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.